Okay, so I'm here with Annie Rose. Thank you for joining with us today, Annie Rose.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And you and I have been friends for over a decade. We met through Landmark Education in 2003. And I wanted to interview you today and share you with my community because I've always seen you as a free spirit, a creative, loving, and committed spirit. You've gone to South Africa and you've walked El Camino de Santiago 2 times.
Yeah.
And all the transformational work that you've been a part of at Landmark Education, and you're an educator, a teacher, teaching college and in Durango in the past, right?
Yeah.
So there are so many wonderful things about you and the way that you really live your life as a spiritual journey. So I'm so excited to have you here. And why don't you share a little bit about who you are and what you're up to in the world so people can get a sense.
Okay, so I'm Annie Rose, as Rachel said. I do a lot of different things. As Rachel mentioned, I've been an educator. I worked for Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado, teaching composition. I've also worked as a professional artist. I've worked in telecom. I've worked as a personal organizer. I've traveled to different parts of the world. And then I have education in international affairs and political science, which I haven't formally done anything with, except that I've been inspired to travel and really have an impact on society through that education. And then I just recently moved to Los Angeles with my husband, which is super exciting. And so now I'm a surfer. By all means, not professional, very much an amateur. And I'm also working as a freelance writer and editor. So that's what I do now. That's a little bit about me.
That's so awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that. And so people can see that you're like in California, in the background, nice sunshine. And one thing that I wanted to ask you about, because you just did the advanced course for Landmark or with Landmark Education for the second time. And
Yeah.
so for people who don't know, Landmark Education is seminars and courses to help people really get who they are and create a new possibility for living. And I know for myself that I say when I did the advanced course, I really got who I am at my core for the first time in my life and really released a lot of fears. It was a room with like 200 people or 150 people, and I was up on the stage with the leader, and I was pretending and acting, and he called me out on it in front of everybody, and I broke down and cried and lived out my worst fear of being humiliated and not being perfect in front of all these people. And I remember looking out over the sea of the audience, and he was like, be present with these people. What do you see? What are you present to? What's really going on right now? And I saw this sea of people who had nothing but love for me. Even in what I perceived to be my weakest, lamest moment. I was like, oh my God, they're for me. They love me. They support me. They get it. They're not judging me. And then I invented the possibility of that who I am is love, and my life is about loving, and I really think that that's what I'm up to. So I'm so curious about what had you do it again at this point in your life, and what did you get?
Well, I first did the advanced course just before I met you, so it was more than a decade ago, and I was just getting out of my career in telecom. And the thing that I invented as a possibility in that course was being inspiring, which was something that I never ever thought I could be. I always thought that other people were inspiring and I was just trying to survive and I wasn't as good as everybody else. And I never really related to myself as somebody who could be courageous and take risks and inspire somebody through that. And when I took that advanced course, I started to live a more inspirational life. So I started to take risks. I started to travel to other countries. I had never sold a single painting or taken a painting class, but I started telling people I was a professional artist. And I started to sell artwork, and I showed my work in galleries and had art shows and all kinds of stuff. And for the next decade or so, I could see that I was really inspiring people. So that continued. That never really ended, but I started to feel more and more resigned and cynical about the world and just really upset about racism and poverty and everything that's happening in the world. And for the past 6 months or so, I've just not really felt like me being inspiring was enough, and it wasn't deeply satisfying for me. So I would do courageous things and I would inspire people, but inside I was basically crying constantly, just constantly sad, constantly anxious, constantly fearful. So one of my best friends took the advanced course for the first time, and I decided to fly into Denver and take it with her, which is why I went to Denver to do it. And this time, it was really interesting because I didn't really share much, and I usually share all the time in courses. And nobody really paid much attention to me. And one of the times that I did share, the leader called me very dramatic, which was really upsetting. I'm like, I am not dramatic, really dramatically. And I resisted it, but I just sat with it. And at some point, I realized that I am dramatic, but maybe not externally. I'm very dramatic internally. So if one thing goes wrong, I feel like it's the end of the world. And in my mind, there are a million things going wrong, and internally that feels like everything is wrong, and I almost haven't been able to deal with it. And so I just sat with being dramatic and realized that that was an internal thing. And by the end of the course, the new possibility that I invented is the possibility of peace fulfilled now, and not waiting for peace in the world before I get to be at peace internally. And since then, I've just been really peaceful. And I've had challenges, even in the past couple of days since I finished the course. And I just still feel this really deep sense of inner peace. So I feel like now I get to be inspiring, but I also get to be at peace for myself. And I get to be less dramatic about what's happening in the world, which is really wonderful for someone like me, because I really want to impact people and impact communities, but I also am not able to do so if I'm suffering inside, and if I'm depressed, and if I'm sort of hiding out in the house because I don't feel like I can be face to face with people. So that's the big thing that I got sort of as a possibility, which is landmark language, out of the course.
Yeah. That's beautiful, because I think so many people can relate to that. It's like a lot of sensitive, intuitive, caring, loving people are really here to make a difference and want to make a difference, but it can feel overwhelming. And so a lot of times we isolate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you really got... Oh, were you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
So you shared that you really got that you have a commitment, and inside of that commitment there were a couple things that you talked about. One is that you want to end poverty. You're a stand for ending poverty, and I'm really curious about that and anything you want to share around that. And also inside of that you're a healer, that you really got yourself as a healer, which I'd love for you to say more about that, because I relate to myself as a healer, and
you are, absolutely.
So tell us about that.
So when I was in my advanced course, well, that's not true. So ever since I was little, I've been interested in ending poverty. I grew up, my mom, with a mom who didn't have much money, And I really felt the impact of poverty. And I also saw it in my friends' lives. A lot of my friends were living in poverty as well. And then as I got older and started traveling to other countries and started studying international affairs and political science, I really realized how much of a problem poverty really is in our world. I care about a lot of things like ending racism, ending sexism, etc. And when I think about all of those things, most of those things exist inside of poverty. So I sort of feel like I get the most bang for the buck by going after poverty.
Yeah.
And ending poverty has seemed impossible, and it has seemed really painful, and it has seemed like I didn't really have what it took to stay in the game of ending poverty. Because if you're connected to poverty, you see people starving, you see people suffering because they can't pay their bills, you see what happens, and that can be really discouraging. So in the advanced course, when I realized that I was dramatic, and I realized that I could stop being dramatic, I started to see a new way to affect poverty, and that is basically by shifting the paradigm inside of which poverty exists. So I don't actually want to work on poverty at all. What I want to work on is the paradigm that exists in our culture that poverty is able to exist inside of. So I don't know exactly what that paradigm is. I know that capitalism is a part of that paradigm. I know that lack of community is a part of that paradigm. I know that the 9 to 5 or the 8 to 5 work week is a part of that paradigm. I know that suffering and depression is a part of that paradigm. So there are all sorts of things that I know are part of the paradigm, but what I don't know yet is what would a paradigm look like that would cease to allow poverty to exist. Does that make sense?
Totally, yeah.
Okay, good. So what I'm really interested in is not so much, going into a community and figuring out how we can get people jobs and figuring out how we can, get people more money, etc. Although that's nice, that's a Band-Aid fix, and I recognize that. I'm more interested in looking at, how do we shift the way that we think? How do we shift the way that we act? How do we shift the way that the world occurs for us? How do we shift our structures? How do we shift our experiences such that poverty literally wouldn't have an ability to exist anymore? So how can we end poverty without working on poverty, but instead creating basically what it is that we do want? So that's the sort of realization that I had in the advanced course, is that I no longer have to work really hard on poverty, which is such a relief because that's really painful. And instead I can work on shifting the paradigm, which is a lot more interesting to me.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm present to a lot of things. One is that, Einstein has that quote about you can't fix the problems with the same thinking that created them.
Yes.
And so I really hear that you do have this huge commitment. And, I think that there's a lot more of us, people around our age and this generation, who just really knows that something else is possible. And you're right. It's like, who wants to go play in the mud and try to make it pretty? It's like, so we're really, inventing what else we could create. And so what do you have to share about, what do you think that is? How do we create new paradigms, new ways of thinking about things?
Well, I'm not positive, for one, but what I do know is that in my life, I've had the benefit of being inside of a lot of different paradigms. So when I was younger, there was a way that I saw the world. And then when I first did the Landmark Forum, I saw the world in a completely different way. When I got my bachelor's degree in international affairs, I saw the world in yet another way. When I got my master's degree, I saw it in another way. When I got married, I saw it in a whole other way. So the way that I perceive the world is constantly shifting. And as I see the world in different ways, my actions change. So one of the things that I know is that if we want to shift a paradigm, we have to start to shift our perspectives. And all of us have to do that, because for that to happen at a global scale, we need to reach the tipping point, essentially, where enough people see a shift in something that something becomes the new norm, right? Or that shift becomes the new norm. And one of the things that I do, and I realize I've done throughout my life, is I try to have as many adventures as possible. And and I try to take risks, and I try to do things that I really want to do, even though I think I might fail. And actually, I have failed a lot. And for a while, or for a long time, I never really saw how me taking adventures could possibly be something that ends poverty, for example. But what I learned, especially when I walked El Camino de Santiago this past May, is that we have to essentially blow our own minds. Like, we have to see beyond where we're already seeing. So, for example, when I was on El Camino de Santiago, there was this beautiful, amazing day. I was walking, up this mountain and through these clouds, or actually I thought that it was just fog at the time. And I reached the top of the mountain, and I turned around, and I realized that I had been walking through this huge sea of clouds, and I was all of a sudden above the clouds. And there were clouds hitting my face, which was a really interesting feeling. And I could just see this amazing sight, and I was literally speechless. I was trying to tell some of my walking mates, to look at it, and I was trying to express its beauty, and I could not get the words. And it was a kind of beauty that literally blew away my perception of the most beautiful thing. And I have a pretty strong version of beauty. I see beauty everywhere, but this was beauty beyond anything I'd ever imagined. And it changed the way that I see the world. So there's something about, when you go on an adventure and you have a liminal experience, and liminality is the term that my friend Janine introduced me to. She also walked the Camino at a different time. And it's this state of being in between places. So you're no longer where you were, and you're not yet where you're going to be. You're in this liminal space. And when I was on El Camino, I was in that space for most of the time. I walked the walk by myself, so nobody was there who knew my name. Nobody was there who knew my personality. I hardly knew who I was. And I wasn't at the end of the walk yet. So that whole time I was in this liminal space. And before I had that experience of beauty, I had, a preconceived notion of the most beautiful thing. And then my mind was blown, and I was in a space of liminality, or liminal. I don't even know if liminality is a word. It's really liminal.
Sure.
I like liminality. Somebody will correct me, I'm sure. So I was in a liminal space for a moment where beauty as it had been had ceased to exist, and beauty as it could be wasn't fully in place. And I found myself being completely present and completely moved and completely able to see the world as it was, or something like that. It was just this really juicy place. And that also happened in other ways too. I remember the first time I saw somebody who was starving when I was in South Africa, or actually I think I was in Lesotho, Africa at that point. And I'd only seen that in, shiny, glossy brochures that were trying to raise money, or
right.
on a National Geographic special or something like that. And to see that in real life, it does the same thing. It was like I had this preconceived notion of what starvation looked like. And when I saw that, it blew my mind. And I was in this liminal space. And it was before I had arrived at the conclusion that poverty was bad, or that this was a bad situation. And in that liminal space, what I was completely present with that little kid. And I could actually see him, and I could feel him, and I could get him, and I could love him. And that was the thing that had me say, oh my God, this is a human being that's starving. This isn't a photograph of somebody starving. This isn't a movie of somebody starving. This isn't an idea of somebody starving. This is a human being who's starving. And it wasn't sad, and it wasn't beautiful, and it wasn't painful. It was just present, and it was true. And it was a space of what was happening then and there. So I think we can have these liminal experiences by by taking adventures, essentially, and by seeing things firsthand that we've never seen before, and by being present to that space where, we're all of a sudden inside of something that we don't know, something that we don't recognize. And that space almost always delivers us to a brand new space. So, to tie it all back around, I hope this is all making sense.
Yes.
I think that part of how we shift a paradigm is by putting ourselves in that liminal space, right? And we can do that by doing things that we've never done before, seeing people or hanging out with people who are new to us, going on adventures, things like that. We put ourselves in that liminal space, then we allow ourselves to arrive at something that's unfamiliar to us. And that could be the new paradigm, right? And then that might shift again. I think that it's always shifting. So,
yeah. That's amazing. That's really beautiful. I got chills when you were talking because I can hear so many things in that, One, it's like, I guess in my work, the way I say it to people, and I've also heard it described like in A Course in Miracles, it's like being in the hallway. You're not yet to where you're going, and you're not who you were. And, I think that's a lot of the people that I work with are people who, they're in a transition, they're in that liminal space, and it's groundless. And it can be scary, and they want to know that everything's going to be okay, or they want answers. And it's so beautiful because it reminds me of the cocoon. And they say that there's a particular time that if you were to look inside a cocoon, there's nothing.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's what transformation is, and that's what self-growth is. And I think you make a really important point that you're ultimately saying it comes back to self. If I want to change the world, I have to start right here. And I have to be willing to do something different in my own life. So, El Camino, would you be willing to tell us, for people who don't know what that is or why you did that, what is that? And second of all, for people who, kind of like me, sometimes I'm not as adventurous as I'd like to be. Because El Camino, I read the book by Sonia Choquette called Walking Home. Have you read that?
I have not. I need to.
It's so good. And I just cried, and I couldn't wait to get in bed every night and read it. And I really want to walk that, but not at all. It sounds terrible. So tell us what it is, and how do you do that? How did you make yourself go walk it twice?
Well, your response is perfectly normal. It's like, oh, I want to do that, and not at all. I definitely felt that way. And it's funny because you strike me as one of the most adventurous people since I've known you. You're always putting yourself in a liminal space. So, so the first time I walked El Camino de Santiago was pretty much unintentional. I was in London with a group of women. It was too cold and expensive there, so we found the cheapest flight we could to some place called Almeria, Spain. None of us really spoke Spanish, but off we went. And eventually we kind of went our separate ways, and I was thinking of what to do, and I remembered that my Spanish teacher had mentioned this thing called El Camino de Santiago. And I knew it was inexpensive, and I knew it was in Spain. And so that convinced me. And El Camino de Santiago is basically a set of walks, pilgrimages across Spain that were, and forgive me, I don't know the history very well. I should, but I don't. But St. James basically walked the pilgrimage, and then eventually his bones were put to rest, or he was put to rest in Santiago de Compostela, which is at the end of the pilgrimage. So people come from across the world, and they walk across these various routes through Spain to get to this final pilgrimage site. So the first one that I did is the one that's now relatively famous. It was portrayed in the movie The Way, so a lot of people walk that one now. When I did it, it was not famous, so it's not well paved, or anything like that. And Jennifer and I ended up walking El Camino de Santiago together, and we were not prepared. We didn't have the right gear. We had no idea what we were doing. We didn't have a guidebook. We had no idea. So we just sort of learned how to do it along the way. And you follow these painted yellow arrows, like fancy signs saying, here's where you go. There's just, there'll be a yellow arrow on a tree or a signpost or something like that. And you follow that. And then you stay in little hostels that are just for pilgrims every night. And you have community dinners, and then you have this amazing experience. The first time I walked it, it was the most miraculous thing I'd ever done. Like every single day, something miraculous and amazing happened. And every single day, I hated it with a passion. It was hard. It was painful. I had tons of blisters. I was sad. I was emotional. I had just gotten out of a relationship, so I was mind-screwing myself constantly. And at the same time, it was amazing and mind-blowing. Mm-hmm. So that was 10 years ago. Wow. And then this year, I just felt like it was time to walk it again. And I think that I had been far enough away from it that it sounded like a good idea once again. Mm-hmm. And so I bought my ticket, and I prepared this time. So I had a much lighter backpack. I had better walking shoes. I trained for it. I actually bought a guidebook. And this time I walked a different route, so it was also a new route to me. And I remember within the first 4 days, my feet hurt so badly that I wanted to quit. I actually started looking at other options, what I could do with my time for the next 40 days. And I thought, like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. Why did I ever choose to do this again? And I remembered how much it hurt, and I remembered that I would be in my own head for most of the day, and that it just that it would sort of bring up everything that I was dealing with, and that there wouldn't really be anything to do with it except keep walking. And so, anyway, I had that thought, and then that thought passed, and I continued on the walk, and I ended up on that walk walking, I think, 520 miles in 30 days. So it was about an average of 17 or 18 miles a day. And this time I actually really loved it. And I let go of suffering through it. And I just allowed myself to be in the space that I was the whole time. So sometimes I just cried to myself, or didn't cry, well, to myself because I was walking alone, but cried out loud the whole time I was walking. And on some days I talked out loud to myself. And on some days I was completely quiet. Some days I listened to music. Some days I walked with people. But on all of those days, I really just let myself be in the space that I was and sort of witness what I was witnessing. So I don't remember. Does that answer your questions?
Totally. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And do you feel different at the end of it?
I do, and it actually took a really long time. I'm still integrating. I finished the walk in the middle of June, and then I moved to Los Angeles a couple of weeks after I got back from that walk. And so, I went on this pilgrimage, and then I came back to a life that was not at all the same. So I had left my career as a teacher. I had moved to a new city. I was now living with my in-laws, which I still am until we find a house. So it was kind of bizarre and strange to go and be in this really liminal space and then not really have a place to come back to that was already familiar. Yeah. So in a lot of ways, I've been in a liminal space since then. And it's been really hard. I think that I'm trying to think about how to say this, but I guess there have been times since then that I felt like I don't really want to continue to be in this world. And not in a suicidal way at all, but more in a like, oh my gosh, I can't continue to be with the world as it is. And something has to change. And I have to change. And something needs to happen. And that was part of why I took the advanced course as well. So, given all of that, the thing that I can see now that I feel like I've landed somewhere and I sort of have a sense of who I am and what I'm, I'm returned to my devotion to ending poverty, I can see that walk gave me time away to sort of empty myself out. It gave me time to reflect. It gave me time to be away from everything that was familiar. Mm-hmm. It gave me time to cry without having to pull it together because I had to get to work, or because my family was home, or because I had a date with a friend or something like that. It gave me time to connect with people I would never normally connect with. It gave me time to just be with my body. And I definitely am somebody, I learn a lot about things through my body. So to be able to walk every day and to have that physical of an experience was a real gift. And I'm just able to sort of step outside of everything that was familiar and all of the constructs that I was surrounded by, and to sort of see myself and see the world and even see the United States and like the communities I was part of there from a distance, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess that's another gift of the liminal space. It's like you get to sort of look at where you were and it's more clear because you're no longer there anymore. So I think the pilgrimage really gave me that chance. And then it also just, I think, really brought up all of these things that really haven't been working for me. Like I really realized in that walk that I'm done, sort of changing who I am for people. I'm done being sad and affected by people who don't like me or people who criticize me. I'm done doing work that I hate. I'm done doing work that makes me happy.
Yeah.
And then I also realized I'm done doing work that sort of ends with myself. It's like my internal work needs to be for something outside of myself at this point. And I realized all of that through the Camino.
So beautiful. Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing all that. I'm just like, yes, like so good. Yeah. And I can just imagine that with all that time and walking, you could get really clear. So,
yes.
What do you want people to know after all of that? What is your message for the world? What is your stand? Who can we count on you to be?
Thank you. Great questions. Well, I think what I want to leave people with, I'm going to read from my journal. This is my journal from El Camino. And as strange as this is going to sound, I spent a lot of time on my Camino talking with my spirit guides because they were kind of keeping me sane.
Yeah.
And there was one day in particular that I was just crying and I was in a lot of emotional pain, and I asked them to help me, and they said 3 things. First of all you have to do is feel this fully. And they gave me permission to just keep feeling the pain that I was afraid of feeling. And so I felt the fullness of my failures. I felt the fullness of heartbreak. I felt the fullness of confusion on a very sort of visceral level. I let my body feel all of the emotion. I let my mind just go through its process. And every time I go away, I get a little nudge from my spirit guides, come back to feel it fully. Then at some point that stopped working. It worked really wonderfully. Then there were some things that just wouldn't go away. So then they said, okay, the next thing you do is just let it go. Stop everything and just let it go. Stop being so stubborn, let it go. So I did that, and that worked. And then there was something else that I was dealing with that would not go away. I couldn't feel my way through it. I couldn't let it go. It just kept bothering me. And they said, set boundaries. And so I started setting boundaries. And they were boundaries like, okay, I'm allowed to think about this person for this first 6 miles of walking, and then I have to stop. And I'm not allowed to think about them while I'm drinking my coffee and eating my breakfast. Or, okay, I'm allowed to cry about this person for 5 minutes, and then I have to stop. So I just set boundaries like that, and then also thought about what boundaries I could set with that person when I returned, right, in our relationship and everything else. So I want to mention those 3 things because for me, they've been a lifesaver inside of adventure. Because when you're on an adventure, it's fun and it's exciting, but it's also oftentimes really difficult, and it can be really scary and confusing. And like you said, it can be really, really groundless. I mean, it essentially is groundless. So you have to have some tools to sort of be with that groundlessness and to be whatever comes up in that space. So again, the first thing you do is you feel it fully. If that doesn't work, you just let it go. And then if that doesn't work, then you set boundaries and you just keep going through those three things. And I found that eventually things slipped away. So that's one thing I want to leave everyone with. And then, you know that my stand is to end poverty, and people can work on that with me or not. But the main thing that I want, like what I really would love for people to do, is to start having adventures and to start exploring in even more depth who they are, and to start especially exploring the constructs that are shaping them, because we live in a world of constructs. We live in a world of things that seem to be real, that are absolutely, I mean, they're real in a physical sense, but they're not actually real, right? Like, we can shift constructs over time, but we can't shift them until we actually know that they're constructs. So I would love for people to do the work to recognize, you know, what constructs are shaping them, and then to ask the question, you know, if I were to let go of this construct, what reality could I create, or what possibility could I create, or what new paradigm could I start to sort of speak into existence that would allow for a more empowering construct? Because we probably won't get away from them, but we can hope to have more empowering constructs, and constructs that, again, are not a space for poverty, or are not a space for racism, or are not a space for, you know, all of these other really difficult things that we face in our world. So I think that's it.
Wow. That's really beautiful. That's awesome. Like, I just feel that through my whole body, the truth of that, you know, and those are such juicy nuggets of wisdom for people. Like, those three things, seriously, like, there you go. Those are perfect. And I love that you got that from your spirit guides, because I don't think that my community will think that's weird.
Probably mine either.
Yeah. So I just thank you so much for who you are in the world and who you be. And you've always just been a bright light to me, and someone who makes the world a better place. And you are not alone in this journey, and I just have so much faith and belief in that, you know, we're just changing it. We're transforming the world. And so thank you for being an angel of light.
Thank you. And I want to thank you too. And just, I think one of my best memories of you was when you were a coach in my leadership program at Landmark, and you were up on a balcony, and we were at a party, and you were acting out some character and being hysterical and talking in all these different accents. And my boyfriend at the time said something like, "That's what a leader is. Like, she is what a leader is." And everybody was just sort of like watching you and laughing and free and happy. And to me, you've always been that person. It's like you're dealing with all the really deep stuff of what it means to be human, in a really loving, funny, compassionate, fully expressed way. And I really love that about you. And I love the work that you do, you know, as I've watched it unfold from afar, the work that you do as an educator, but also the work that you do as a psychic and as a healer. And you're essentially, you know, working with people and inviting them into seeing what their constructs are and inviting them into the liminal space. And then you've always just been such a space of comfort and security, which is exactly what people need in that space. So thank you, too, for all the beautiful work that you're doing.
Thank you for that. Thank you. It feels so good to hear that memory and to see myself through your eyes, and to just be reminded, because, you know, we all need reflection, because I'm like, am I doing anything? Some days, you know.
Yeah, we all are. I mean, and, you know, we are. We're doing something, for sure.
So I appreciate that so very much. Thank you, Annie Rose. And if any of my community wants to follow you, connect with you, anything like that, where could they find you?
Well, they can find me on Facebook. I'm Annalise, Analise Rose. I think you can just put in that and find me. And then I'm also building my business, Be Authentic. So they can also find me at www.beauthentic.com. And right now it's under construction, but they can still contact me through that and we can connect. And that would be wonderful.
Well, thank you. I love you so much.
I love you too.
Okay. Bye-bye, sweetie.
Bye.